to order. We're showing you poppies as our starting, because I think this is the only ones you're going to see this year. We don't anticipate a good flower year. We may get a few scattered ones, but it's not going to be that nice. We have a little bit of business to handle before we get started. Per our bylaws, we are supposed to present orally at this meeting the slate of officers that are going to be up for re-election at our next meeting. And so Dolores, I need you to come stand next to me so your voice will get picked up by all these mics.
I see. Well, okay.
I'm going to put the chain on the other side of the microphone.
Dolores is our
Put the chain on the other side of the
vice
microphone.
president currently, and it is her job to
The chain, rub it on.
come up with a slate of officers.
Well, you are wired, aren't you?
Yeah, okay. I'll
Okay.
turn- okay.
Can everybody hear?
Okay.
Okay.
Looks like we're good.
Maybe I should say, if you can't hear, raise your hand. Okay. The nominating committee has been very fortunate in that so far our present officers have agreed to serve another term. However, if you want to perhaps be an officer or nominate somebody, you will have the opportunity to do that next meeting. For your memories to be refreshed, our president is Gretchen, vice president is me, our secretary is Janet Winters, our treasurer is Char Taylor, you're out there, and Lori Cruz, and Lori's not here tonight.
But I'm really Kelly in disguise.
Don't tell them that.
Our directors are Terry Landseidel, Siobhan Sladek, and Judy O'Laughlin. And as I say, this isn't a lifetime job. If you want to have a little fun and learn a little bit, it's a good thing to do. Is there anything else you want from me?
That's it. Thank you very much. We will have our elections next meeting, and you will have an opportunity, if you don't like somebody who's been nominated on the slate, you can add them to the nominations also. Let me get my little technical stuff here going. Oh, help me. Windows, my computer, and his machine. Looks like we succeeded. Well, yeah. Okay, let me get my program up and running here. A little challenging. Okay. I really got interested in the history of the Postal Service at Rosamond after reading an article many years ago done by Christopher, who was writing for the Mojave Desert News, and I think it was way back in the time when the Devers still owned it. And she wrote an article that really kind of got me busy thinking about postal history. Now, this is not the first time I have talked about this. In fact, this is not even an original, newly researched presentation. I originally gave a presentation to the Historical Society way back when, before I was involved this heavily, when we were still meeting at the Catholic Church in one of the classrooms. And it was back when Gladys Adams was still alive. Remember Gladys?
Yes.
We picked her up. she had, at that time was living over on one of the streets in the housing tract.
Shelley?
Shelley maybe, yeah. We picked her up and took her to this meeting. And so I talked about the Postal Service, and Gladys interceded a lot and added to my conversation. And so, excuse me, from that, I did put together a PowerPoint that I did show to the Historical Society, but do I remember when? Of course not. It had to have been 2012, 2013, and the only reason I know that is because there are slides in here that are from 2012. So this is an old presentation, and I wanted to present it for two reasons today. First reason, I want to get it videoed, and I want to get it out there, and I'm hoping somebody will see it and say, oh, I have more information. Or, no, that's not right. This is the way it should be. So that's really my main goal. I also, want to know from any of you if you have more information, or if you know someone who might be interested in doing more research. Anyway, this is what I presented some time ago, and I hope that it comes or brings forth more information. Before I really get into the Postal Service history, I want to refresh in your minds a little bit about the town site of Rosamond itself. So, we were not a town site until about 1876. Now, the reason that there's two dates is when you read different articles, you sometimes get different dates. And I always tried to indicate that I got different information from different places that I read. So, as I think all of you know, it was established as a town site owned by the Southern Pacific Railroad. When they came through, the railroad was granted, I think this is right, is it a section of land alternating on either side of the railroad? I believe that's the stories. Anyway, prior to that, the area over there, that's the town side of Rosamond, had been called Sand Creek. I think that might come from the fact that, as you know, in good years where there's lots of rain, water comes out of the hills, because we've already seen, a thing that Cecil Burton did, where he showed about where the springs were there. And see, there was really nothing in 1876 except dirt and bushes and the railroad. In 1887, and E.H. Seymour bought 33 lots. Still don't have anything much there. In 1904, and in one place it was 1907, the town site was bought by C.G. Calkins for $13,000 with a Mr. Stinson holding the mortgage. Now, see, we still don't have much going on. At this time, remember, the Hamilton Hotel wasn't really started till 1903, 1904, and if you remember the pictures of the Hamilton Hotel, there's nothing around it. Well, in 1915, Mr. Stinton gave the mortgage on the town site to the Union Rescue Mission. In 1916, the Union Rescue Mission received clear title. In 1935, they put in a water system. So there must have been a lot of development between 1916 and 1935 for a water system to be profitable. The Union Rescue Mission erected a church in 1936, which you should all have remember hearing about from the Loomis presentation last time, because part of that family got the bricks to build that church that is still standing on Diamond Street. And George Hummel was appointed the mission's representative. Now, a bit about, oh, and that's where Hummel Hall came from, because George Hummel bought in a lot of the land at one point and did a lot to develop Rosamond. Okay, the Postal Service history. And this kind of confused me a little bit, because I had always thought that somebody else was the first postmaster, but we'll talk about that in a second. There was written down in one of the articles that I read that the Postal Service was, the first postmaster was 1885. And it was a David Bales. And there was a time when, I guess, Balesville was even what the town was called. Instead of Rosamond, it was Balesville. And then it closed in 1887 and reopened in 1888. Now, if you get online, you can probably see this. And I would like someone to find a way to access the Library of Congress's records to check this out. I found nothing else until we talked about this next person. And this next person is Charles Graves. And I remember asking Gladys Adams, how come he's called the first postmaster when I find, you know, this thing about Bales? And she said, Charles Graves not only was the postmaster, but he also collected the mail from its drop-off point and delivered it. So he did the total thing. Now, as we know, those of you who have been in town a long time, the Graves family is very important in this town. I mean, Charles Graves built the first school. He donated tons of land to the schools. You know, when I started teaching, one of his son, I believe, was on the school board. The family has been very prominent in this town. And so he was postmaster from 1895. Now, there wasn't much here in 1895. And again, I get different dates when I read different articles, until 1903. Following 1903, Ella Kenton was postmaster. Now, this is a picture that I think a lot of you have seen. I believe Ella is the one standing in the corner there by the post down on the ground. I believe that's Ella. And this is called the Kenton Stuckey House because the Stuckeys, I think, built it, and Kenton was a niece of the Stuckeys. So she became the postmaster or postmistress in 1903 and was postmistress until 1910. Now, what happened to this building? And where was the building? Well, the building was built before 1890 by John Stuckey, as I said earlier, and it was located at the center, at what is now Center Street and Sierra Highway. It was moved in July of 1964 to the Tropico Gold Camp and Museum, where it stands today as not much more than deteriorating sticks. And it breaks my heart that we've let a building that was really, you know, important in the history of the Postal Service deteriorate. Some subsequent postmasters after Ella Kenton, and by the way, sometimes it's spelled with an O, I found in an article that I read names like Ida Budd. Does anybody remember a Budd name?
Never heard that one.
1910 to 1912. Truman Hamilton, 1913 to 1916. And you know, at this point, I know there was a post office out at Willow Springs, so possibly that's where the location of the post office for Rosamond was, because Willow Springs in this era, in 13, 16, up through the 20s, Willow Springs was a happening place. Then there was a H.W. Davis, and then Lucy Angle, which I've also seen written as Angel. She was a postmaster mistress, according to what I read. She was for a long time. And I don't know if these other people also delivered the mail, were in charge of getting the mail delivered. I don't know. I wish we could do some more research. Okay, we're looking for places where the post office might have been. And this is another building. This is the Charles Ammon General Merchandise Store. And it was built in the early 1900s by Walter and Florence Webb. And it was along Sierra Highway. It later became the Charles Ammon General Merchandise Store. And at some point, this is where the mail was delivered. Now the building was built, as I said, and not only housed a post office, it also housed the town library.
Gretchen,
Yes.
where at along Sierra Highway would that have been?
It would be right along Sierra Highway because this building burned. I think it was not too far from where the garage was that you're going to see in a minute that's burning. Before we get to that, let me, this is Mrs. Angle's father, who carried the mail from the railroad depot to the store. And this is, the big sign that you see behind there is that Charles Ammon's Merchandise General Store. The lady, the woman, we think is Mrs. Lucy Angle, who was the postmaster from 1919 until, as you saw, quite a while. There was a fire along that area, and when I think when I talked about the Hamilton Hotel, I think I mentioned that Noel Dease's father's garage caught on fire and burned. And it wasn't whoops. Mac, how do I go back?
I'll punch the left arrow.
I'm trying. I don't know. Oh, over here. Aha. I don't want this house yet. What am I doing? I'm going the wrong way. There we go. Okay, this is an article taken that I got from Noel Dease about the fire that destroyed his father's garage. Noel Dease is the brother of Juanita, who had Juanita Dease in the old Hamilton Hotel. And in this picture may have been that store, what was it called? The Charles Ammon's General Merchandise Store. This picture may have been that, because I think they happened in a similar time, in the 1930s, early 1930s. So there goes the general store. Okay, so this information Noel did before he left. Then in I think it's 3 or 4, this building was built. It's called the Angel House or Angle House. And it was used as a post office, and in the library it had the town, or the library was in the basement. And this building still stands. And I'll show it to you at the end of this presentation. Now, the Angles, one thing before I leave. Noel Dees told me that he remembers this house being built and that his brother fell off the wall that he had climbed while they were building it and broke his leg. So I have that little memory of what Noel told me. So it was in the 30s because the Dees family came in the early 1930s. Here's Mr. and Mrs. Angle, or Angel. Now, I have been told, and this was told to me by somebody, I believe, they said that they were of opposite political parties, so no matter which party was in office, one of them was always the postmaster. They were always appointed as postmaster. But I'm not sure that's true because the only one that I find when I look at the written information is Mrs. Angle. So it may have been that she just let her husband do it when the other party was in, I don't know. But Mrs. Angle was the postmaster from October 1, 1990 through March 31, 1952. Now, and it was, you know, they were there in that house, the Angle house. Now, this picture has been out and about some. Here we have the next postmaster. She wasn't postmaster for too long, but this is a picture showing her receiving the first mail from the new mobile postal unit in August of 1952. I'm assuming that that's a truck. I'm assuming prior to that time, maybe the mail was delivered via train. I mean, it's just I don't have any information other than I'm assuming. And, you know, I wondered, now how did Mrs. Weil get involved? Well, the Weils owned the market that was there on Sierra Highway. That's now, it's some initials. What is that?
K&S Market.
K&S. It's now the K&S Market. It was at one time Johnson's Market. It was, okay. So it was originally the market that the Weils owned. And Mr. Weils decided he wanted to build a post office. So he did, next to his market. Now, it wasn't that easy, as you're going to see in just a few minutes. This was the first building built to be exclusively a post office. All the others, there was a library, there was a hotel, they had a place for people to stay. This was exclusively a post office. And here, actually, I have a picture, another set of pictures taken, and there's Weils Market. I think you can see the sign that says Weils Market. And you can see the post office. And this next letter I just absolutely love. And I hope I can read it off the screen. I meant to try to copy it, but I forgot. This is a letter that was written April 17, 1954. It was written by Mr. Weils, Stanley Weil, to the Assistant Postmaster General. Dear Sir, in March of, I'm not sure I can read that.
1950s.
Okay. Inspector, somebody approached me regarding providing space for Rosamond Post Office. The requirements were, I believe, 600 square feet of floor space. And at that time, the office had 170 boxes. He desired to put up a 20 by 30 addition. Oh, we decided to put up a 20 by 30 addition to my store building to house the post office. And I submitted a bid of $35 per month rental fee for this space. My wife accepted the position as acting postmaster and took over the office on April 3rd, 1952. When I applied for building permits, the building department demanded that we set back 20 feet from the front of my existing building. This made it mandatory to change the post office location, and instead of building an addition to the present building, we had to erect a separate building. And as long as we had to do this, and anticipating community growth, we erected a 32 by 40 foot, was it 40 or 48 foot? 40 foot, I think, building, and installed 450 boxes. My investment in this building is as follows. Land, $3,300. Building, I think that's $15,000. And equipment, $2,000. For a total, well, it can't be $15,000. For the total is $14,000. So that middle has to be $1,000 for the building.
11 probably.
Well, 11,000, yeah. It has to be 11,000 for the building. Fire insurance is $3 per 100 a year, and county taxes are $117. I just love this. So then he goes on to say, you know, that he's going to have to charge a little more rent than he thought. And so, I think this is a priceless letter. I was able to get a hold of this through the man who was at the building, and I won't tell you the name of the building yet, but he had archived this and gave it to me. So now here we have the U.S. Post Office. Official. We have our own building. No other use, just the post office. The next postmaster was Bill O'Neill. And he was postmaster a long time also, from 1955 to sometime after 1980s. And here is Bill at that location, that building that Weil built. Okay, when that building no longer was adequate, they built this post office. And this is the post office that existed when I came in the 60s. It was actually dedicated in July of 1959. And here is Bill O'Neill in front of that post office. So here is our current post office. Now, back when I first did this whole PowerPoint presentation, I think some people did some more research and they came up with a date of when this was built. But we cannot, or I cannot, I should say, find my notes. I do not remember when this was built.
obviously
It
after
was
55.
around 75. Or they started the paperwork in 75 to get it, and it took longer than they anticipated. She had no idea it would take so long to do all the paperwork. But I know that she started the paperwork to get a new building because she used to come in the shop all the time at that point in time.
Okay, who's she? Which?
Betty Lancaster.
Betty Lancaster, okay.
She's the one that started the
Well, now,
paperwork to get this
according
post
to what I
office.
had, Bill O'Neill was still postmaster, so he wasn't then. Is that what you're saying?
I know that she started the paperwork in 75.
Okay.
And she was quite a while there.
I think she might have been postmaster.
I think Betty Lancaster was postmaster, but that would be after Bill O'Neill then,
Right.
correct? We need to do more research, Wall, that's why I am doing this. Okay, so I figured it had to have been 1980-ish, but so that would be, okay, 1975 is when they started the paperwork.
The paperwork, and it took, I want to say about 3 years or so. And she said, when she finally got the approval to build it, she goes, well, you know, by the time they get done, this place is going to be too small.
Okay, so just for the fact that we're putting this on video, and I don't know if that mic will pick up, Ella Garcia is the one who said that Betty Lancaster, who was at that time postmaster, came in and she's thinking about 1975, and she was talking about starting the project and figured that it was going to take so long with all the red tape that it probably would be obsolete by the time it got finished.
Well, when she started being postmaster, she had another name. She married Russ Lancaster after that.
Lackey.
Oh, yes.
Lackey, that's it, I couldn't think of it. She was
Okay.
Betty Lackey.
Betty Lackey.
In case you find that name somewhere.
Okay, so we need to look for Betty Lackey. See if it, no, this pen isn't going to work for me. Okay, so now, we've gotten some information, and thank you. This is part of why I was doing this.
I can remember at the courthouse.
Now I have another question for all of you. What happened to the former post office buildings? Because some of them are still around. You know what happened to the one that was on Center Street and Sierra Highway? It got moved to the Gold Camp. We know that, we know where that one went. So what happened to the others? Okay, this is a picture of the Wayside Cafe, which is the one that Vile built. And this picture was taken about 2012, so I know that's about the time when I last did this PowerPoint. Does anyone remember who turned it into a cafe? Because as soon as the post office left, it got acquired and was a cafe. I know Jim Harness at some point was involved in the Wayside
Well, I
Cafe.
think Chuck
That was
Fitz
after-
owned the land.
But
That was after the
didn't,
Wayside, that was after the Wayside Cafe.
Yeah, when did the Wayside, who opened
didn't
this
the Tunnels
cafe?
run it for a long time? Because Mabel Tunnel, I know the count thing that had the pies were always so good. And Mabel Tunnel was there for years, and I thought, I don't know if they owned it or.
Ruth Hodges ran it for a while, so.
So we had Ruth Hodges involved, Mabel Tunnel. As I say, I remember Jim Harness.
Yeah, but he changed it to the Harness Cafe.
And
He changed the name.
he changed the name for a while.
Yeah, and
Okay.
then somebody else
And
got it,
then
they-
it went
They
back.
went back.
It was a
So,
village grill for a
minute.
while.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
right.
and then.
so it was the Village Grill for a while, and then it
and
went
then
back to the Wayside.
Yep.
Anyway, I have a little story to tell about this. Maybe I'll tell it now. I was going to wait and do it at the end, but I have a story to tell about the Wayside Cafe. Because as you know, the Wayside Cafe closed a few months ago. And sometime back, Siobhan and I were talking, on the phone, and I said, we have to keep our eye on the Wayside Cafe. It's being renovated. You see people there periodically. And you know, they saved some of the boxes from when it was a post office, and they have them under the counter there as you check out. I think that they're probably the boxes that they use to actually sort the mail, possibly. Well, that very afternoon, Siobhan is driving down Sierra Highway and sees somebody there. And so Siobhan just pulled right over and talked to this person. And they had the counter all pulled out. They were taking it to the dump. They were going to do it the day before, but they didn't get around to it. So Siobhan and Dawn, and I don't know who else you acquired there, loaded this thing into the back of a truck. And you're talking what?
About 600 pounds.
About 600 pounds. So now it's in the back of Siobhan's truck. So how are we going to get it out of the back of Siobhan's truck, and how are we going to get it up to my barn to store it? Because I think it's just neat. We have original mailboxes. If we ever get a museum, this would be a perfect counter for us to use. And so Siobhan, do you want to, you can help me with the story. Siobhan conned her son, who happens to be in business in Lancaster, but be part of a motorcycle group that all ride huge Harleys, to get his friends to come up and meet the truck at my house with this thing in the back and unload it. So the truck arrives to my house. This is a couple weeks afterwards. The truck arrives at my house, and we wait around because it took a while for him to gather enough people, because you're talking a huge amount of weight. And so it was just almost getting dark, and we hear them coming. And now I live in the country, and half a mile away, you could hear them coming. It sounded like an invasion. And, you know, vroom, vroom, vroom. And they come down my street, and these guys, we had the gates all open, and they get in, and they hop off, and they all shake my hand, and they go and grab this thing, and they put it in my garage, and then vroom, 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 they're out. And my neighbors are calling.
Did you join a motorcycle gang?
What's happening at your house? But anyway, it now sits in my garage. And thanks to Siobhan, and thanks to Siobhan's son and his friends. So I don't know, we'll wish we could do something for them, Siobhan.
Let's give Siobhan a hand for
Yeah.
being on the ball.
Anyway,
Do you have a picture of it?
yeah, I don't.
Be interesting to see.
I'll try to get that. Anyway, okay. This is what happened to the post office on Diamond Street. Only it's not the same name, but it's still a market.
It's scary.
And then, this is the Angel House,
I had to go in there and get
or Angle House. And it looks not too different than that. And unfortunately, it's now a pot shop.
I'm gonna make
So, what does the future hold for the post office in Rosamond? At what point is this town going to grow enough to have another location? Because as was predicted, the one on 20th and Rosamond Boulevard, you know, was obsolete practically when it opened. And, you know, the town exploded, but we still don't have another post office. I don't know. But anyway, that is a question for another time. Does anyone else have any information that they can contribute?
Lights.
Okay. Okay, we can, I guess we could end this presentation.
Add one more thing here
Can we
real
get the
quick.
lights, please?
Lights,
Come up to Gretchen's
Hold on, hold
microphone
on.
here.
okay.
Because I'm scared of Mac, I'm gonna talk in this microphone, and it's the last thing I do today. I wished I had been on Facebook a week earlier, but March 15th, up in Bakersfield at the Beale Library, they were taking you through how to go through the historical documents up there. And so if someone really wanted to delve into this, the Beale Library has tons of information. The other thing is word of mouth. Last night at 10:30 at night, and I want to make sure that I'm telling Teddy Vile, whose grandfather built the original post office, we are watching your comments. We are so thrilled to have you share your family stories, and they sent Gretchen just a ton of information. And when we do get our museum up and going, because somebody wonderful is going to donate land and a building to us, I can just fill it any minute. We'll have the motorcycle group come tell Gretchen about it.
Part of our grand opening.
They're not Hell's Angels, they're a group of businessmen.
They're just
that are-
really nice guys, but they are very intimidating.
Weekend warriors.
Okay, all righty. Any other comments?
Did they say what they're doing with the Wayside? Are they gonna reopen it?
Oh, yes. It's going, it was, tell me,
It is supposed to be opening up at, the owner of the Village Grill in Lancaster is opening up, and whether or not they're going to call it the Village Grill out here, I don't know. It's got kind of that greenish shade again.
Yeah, I noticed they painted it.
So,
If you Google it, because I thought it was open about a week ago and was going out to breakfast, it's listed as Village Grill Rosamond.
Village Grill
It
Rosamond.
doesn't say when they're opening.
They were supposed to open it the first part of March.
Okay, so should we see if we can get the sign?
Yeah, for sure.
oh, heavens,
Well, I
yes.
think
See
so.
what I'm saying?
Well, I'll just drive right down Sierra Highway. And Jeff's group will be by at 10 o'clock at night.
But really, we might ask them, they might sell it for a donation.
Well, they might, because,
Because that Wayside sign has been there forever. And for in case the video didn't pick up, Shar asked if we should try to get the sign that says the Wayside. And so that's why we are discussing possibly trying to get a hold of that
But late
sign.
at night, but that
The hoodlums.
Kelly, no, I've already got volunteers.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you. Oh, Siobhan, what about next meeting?
oh, next meeting, we are going to do the history of the Dunn family. They have lived off the grid back in the time when living off the grid wasn't quite so cool as it is now. So they're going to tell us their story of that, living on the Fort Tejon Ranch. They do a lot of things where they go into schools and teach kids what it's like to live without electricity and how you take care of animals. And so they're just wonderful community people, great storytellers, and so it's really a treat you don't want to miss.
Okay, thank you all very much, and don't forget, next meeting we will have an election.
What's the date?
Thank you for coming. Oh, the next meeting date, it would again be
The third
the
Tuesday
third
of March.
Tuesday, the third Tuesday of April.
Oh, April.
The third Tuesday of April.
15th,
The 15th, the 15th of April.
the third Tuesday.
Third Tuesday, yeah, I think the 1st of April, so, is on a Tuesday, so it's the third
So
Tuesday.
file your taxes early.
Yeah. Okay, thank you all for coming.